Welcome to r/Askreddit, where we answer the question, current and former residents of an HOA, what is your "I will never live in an HOA again" story? And by the way, please let me know in the comments if you have ever lived in an HOA and tell us about your experiences. Without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. I could write a book on the topic. I have spent several years on the HOA board, so I know when people complain about me, which helps immensely because they are too passive-aggressive to actually confront you. It is not the fact that they hired an attorney to see if they could force my wife to close her business, no signs for business, no in-person traffic, they just hate us, but how our official Karen has been with my kids. When someone brought up that a kid had left a popsicle stick in their yard 2 weeks ago, I pointed out that it is not even something that can be dealt with after the fact and should never be an HOA concern, but if they see my kids do something inappropriate like dropping something where it does not belong, to just tell them. That was my fatal mistake. The Karen made it her life's mission from that point on to follow my kids and watch them at all hours for the tiniest little thing and antagonize them. When my child, who's on the spectrum, was playing with water balloons, she approached and dared him to throw one at her. He was 8 or 9 at the time. I wish he had done it. When the kids were sitting on the rock wall that divides my property from the neighbors, she made a huge stink about it because it was for sale and would keep buyers from being interested. It actually sold for 50k above asking price. She blocks every design we submit for a fence for our new puppies, so we integrated every design concept that she hated into movable planters with a temporary gate because there are no rules on landscaping and because we hate her. We know all the loopholes. I've been triggered enough by these examples, edit to add more grievances, couldn't let it go. So, I don't like HOAs to begin with, but I think it is fine to follow rules to be a good neighbor. But taking official actions against people is so unnecessary most of the time. Soon after moving in, over 7 years ago, my wife and I divorced and I was a single dad with 5 kids and a bit overwhelmed. I got official warnings from the board saying I would be fined $30 a day for failing to landscape my backyard within 6 months of moving in. Nobody could even see it, but technically it was a requirement. I could barely afford to live, so hiring someone was out of the question. I spoke to the HOA president and tried to be human about it. Those who had pressured for action against me ended up being the reason why he resigned within a year and why I stepped in. Another family had a daughter the same age as my daughter and they became good friends immediately. After a few months they stopped answering the door, the kids had been going to private school and we began getting looks of disapproval for being beneath them or something. The mom is also the neighbor who ignored my email on the day that a passing bee colony rested on the community fence and a beekeeper was on the way to rescue them. She sprayed most of them with poison so they could not be removed any longer, harmless honeybees. I was so mad. After my wife and I remarried, we had our second 5th anniversary this year, it was easier to avoid most confrontations except for the new president going off about garbage cans being out too long. In 1 month we had taken the garbage cans out right before a camping trip and so they were not brought in the day the cans were picked up. Not until the following morning. I got an email, my wife and I went out of town another week that month and my son forgot to bring the cans in. Shouldn't be a big deal, life is busy and it is rarely left out. But it was when I was on a business trip and I got an email at 10:30 p.m. about my cans and they were not even technically late and I was threatened to be fined that I absolutely blew up at him. My wife was not even home and I was about to bring the cans in. The family had been out all day. I asked if he wrote emails to everyone because it was ludicrous. He got mad and publicly went off to everyone about people questioning his authority. I left it alone because I knew that even if I proved him wrong, he wouldn't understand it, so it is a waste of energy without there being fines issued. He moved out anyway this year along with another annoying neighbor who was on the board. Only one Karen remains, we are only 14 homes. But for her, I enjoy messing with her at Christmas with a 12-foot inflatable Mickey Mouse, laser lights, music. Many neighbors know what we are up to and why it is intentionally annoying, and our next door neighbor is not bothered. I care about that relationship, good people there. Between that and the green twisty slide off our deck that went in before the HOA, we have some comfort in fighting back. And a user in the comments told this story. When my folks moved into their home, they noticed a couple of dead trees and had someone take them down. The tree guy suggested they take down 2 more leaning trees that were likely to fall down if they got hit with high winds. My dad scheduled the second round of trees to come down a couple weeks later. In the interim, the HOA contacted my parents and said that they had unapproved work done by removing the dead trees and that they would have to get HOA approval to remove any more. My dad had the tree guy send over a report about the dangerous trees to the HOA. The HOA refused to allow my parents to take the trees down. My dad cancelled the appointment with the tree guy. Fast forward 3 weeks and a hurricane blows through, which is not unexpected since this is Florida in September. Like the tree guy predicted, both leaning trees came down and completely destroyed the neighbor's pool. The neighbor was pretty cool about it, but his insurance tried to get my parents to pay for it, claiming they knew the trees were dangerous and did not have them removed. My parents sent along the rejection letter from the HOA and told the insurance company to have a chat with them instead. I'm not sure what happened beyond that, but I know my parents did not have to pay. And the next story goes like this. My old house's backyard bordered an HOA community. Our house was built 30 years before the community was built, so we were not part of it. We used to get notices about violations and fines if we did not correct them. Never did correct them, they finally sent legal papers to repossess our house. Went to court with a tax map that showed our property not part of the HOA community. The judge dismissed their suit against us and found them guilty of harassment. We didn't get awarded much, but I made sure to break every rule of theirs I could until we moved. And the next person says, no huge issues, just up to the minute, griping about every little thing. We were in the middle of moving in and got a nasty gram about some boxes on the side of the house waiting to go out with recycle. Got another one about our lawn right after it was scalped and winter grass planted. They apparently did not approve of nature's time frame on growing grass. Moved back to the old neighborhood, no HOA, and city code takes care of 90% of the BS, weeds, general eyesores, nuisances, etc. No HOA ever again. I have no plans of putting a weight bench in my front yard, but damn it, I want the option. And the next one goes like this. I live in Florida and have the pleasure of living in an HOA neighborhood while not being a part of the HOA. Apparently there are a total of 3 houses in my neighborhood not part of the HOA, and I was fortunate enough to have bought one of them. Every previous owner refused to sign into the HOA, and I have continued this tradition. Best part is getting all sorts of fines, letters, and people knocking on my door informing me of stupid trivial violation. I just get to laugh at them while I explain that I'm not a member of their stupid little club and therefore not beholden to its rules. At one point they had my truck towed out of my driveway because of the HOA's no truck policy. I simply called the cops and reported it stolen. It was found at a local impound lot and returned to me free of charge. The HOA ended up having to pay for the tow/impound fees and tried on several occasions to pass those on to me through fines. Finally had a lawyer write up a cease and desist letter telling them to leave me alone or I will press charges for the theft of my truck and harassment. That was 6 months ago, and I think they finally figured out they have no authority to tell me squat because I have not heard from them since. And the next story goes like this. I love reading contracts and agreements, so when a friend of mine told me about his HOA troubles and not letting him keep his boat behind his house, I jumped on the opportunity. After reading, sourcing and finding a few rulings, I learned that they have very little power to enforce what they cannot see from the road, which affects property value. He took my documentation to the HOA and requested that they remove his fines. They refused, saying the agreement says blah blah blah, and after a few months he finally paid a real estate lawyer $2,000 to go talk circles around the HOA, and they finally backed down, removed his fines and allowed him to keep his boat. Then, out of pure spite and with my design, we built a 40-foot tall temporary structure conforming to both the HOA agreement and building code to fly a flag on a further 25 feet pole. We took it down and put it back up every 3 months for a year. You could see it from almost anywhere in the neighborhood. It was a real triumph and it was hideous. And the next one goes like this. HOA lost paperwork for change of ownership when we bought our house. They sent us letters saying there would be a lien placed on our home if we did not pay the overdue amounts plus over $200 of late fees. I had to call them 3 times to even get someone on the phone who knew how to help me. Then I contacted escrow, who said they had already not only sent all the paperwork, but turns out we had already paid the fees. Called the HOA again, and they were insistent that we had not paid or sent over paperwork. Called escrow again and requested they contact the HOA themselves to sort this out, and HOA still insisted we owed a late fee. I started losing my mind until escrow said they would pay the late fee. A month later we got a letter in the mail saying we were being fined for leaving our trash bins out longer than necessary. FHOA. And another person said, my grandparents lived in an old folks community with a zealous HOA. My grandmother had to go to the hospital because of her many health issues. My grandfather would go with her. This happened once when I was visiting. There was a knock on the door at about 10 AM. 2 elderly women with clipboards immediately jump into a speech about how the trash cans had not been brought in. I explained the situation. One of them said she was in the hospital the previous week but still managed to bring in her trash can and handed me what looked like a ticket for $50. F that stuff. And another person said, I work in emergency services. I've had HOA board members try telling me we could idle our fire engine or park our ambulance there as if I would know the rules. I am usually professional, but the second time they tried to complain about the fire engine idling, I responded along the lines of, go F yourself, I don't care what your bylaw says. Article 300 of Michigan Traffic Code says I can park wherever the F I want. We were there for a family with carbon monoxide poisoning, and I truly didn't give a damn about anything else at that moment. We had crews up and down the road to treat and transport the entire family. And another person said, when I was a kid my parents had a house in a nice cul-de-sac. But it was a working class neighborhood. The transmission in my truck took a doo-doo, so I replaced it in our driveway. A few days later we got a letter citing a clause stating all improvements done on property must be done by a licensed contractor. It was a far reach, but they stood by, as there was nothing in the CC&Rs against working on personal vehicles. My dad made me pay him back for the fine, but for a while afterwards I would go put some oil or coolant under the HOA president's car and hope he was wasting money chasing a non-existent problem. And the next one goes like this. This did not happen to me, but several years ago a coworker told me about how she and her husband put in a small in-ground pool in their backyard. They got all of the required permits and everything, and nobody said boo during the weeks of construction. After the pool was installed and they were getting ready to open it, the HOA sent them a letter informing them that it was in violation of the HOA rules and it had to be removed. I guess their community had a public pool at the clubhouse or something. They ended up going to court and spending thousands of dollars to fight it. In the end, they agreed to erect a high privacy fence around it so that it would not be visible. How ridiculous. And the next story goes like this. I usually like living in HOAs, and the ones I have lived in have been decent, but my parents' HOA is insane. When my dad was diagnosed with cancer and began his chemo, he became too weak to walk. My parents installed a ramp at the front door so he could get his wheelchair into the house. Their neighbor, the HOA president, went crazy. She demanded doctor's notes, appointment slips, and that my dad proves to the neighborhood that he could walk and was lying. My dad was too weak to do anything and mom is too passive, so I had to step in. I threatened to lawyer up and sue her personally. She eventually backed down. My dad passed away in April, and a week after she came banging at our door saying she saw the funeral home come and pick my dad up and that we need to take the ramp down now that he's finally dead. Her exact words. At that point, I called the police right in front of her to report her for stalking and harassment. I moved in with my mom, and now every time this woman sees me, she runs back into her house. On another note, she follows neighborhood kids home from school, asking their names and where they live because she wants to know if they really live there. And my neighbors and I have caught her many times looking into our backyards. And the next story goes like this. My HOA president walks around the neighborhood every day and takes pictures of any violation he finds. There's a management company that does monthly checks for violations, but that is not enough for this old, bored, retired man. About a month after having a baby, I got a knock on the door from the HOA president, which I answer in my post-surgical breastfeeding outfit because a palm front had not been trimmed after being down for 3 days. Then I got a written notice the next day, then I got another notice 2 days later. The HOA maintains the roads and there is a 15 miles per hour speed limit. People drive pretty slow. These idiots put in 3 speed bumps on a 200-foot stretch of road. I've never seen anyone blast through, and I regularly go on walks. They also put up a security camera, raising our monthly dues because one neighbor left their garage door open all day and someone took a few things. We clearly live in a dangerous area full of criminals. I cannot sell yet, but when I do, never living in an HOA again. And the next story goes like this. We rented a condo from the people who owned it, and it was associated with an HOA. We like to grow things, but there was no balcony, so we just had 2 large pots, one on either side of our door. We got a notice one day that we had to get rid of our only plants because they did not fit the aesthetic of the building or something. Basically, they were too ugly. They also didn't have a room to discuss whatever it is they discuss at meetings, so they would do it in the gym for some reason. They would move all of the equipment to the side and set up their tables and chairs and then never moved anything back. One time I accidentally barged in on them in my workout gear and I actually had the nerve to ask them if there was a boardroom I could work out in. I said it on my way out, so I don't know what their response was, but yeah, we did not renew our lease there. And the next one, I live in a neighborhood that has a $1 per month HOA because we have a shared drive with an area drain. That money goes to emptying the area drain every couple of years. The CC&Rs are very laid back and there are no rules, so I wrongfully assumed that would be the experience living here. The HOA president, the guy who schedules the area drains being emptied, is a boomer on a power trip. He's in my business about everything. I got a new furnace and he threatened to sue because the utility company had to use the driveway. I scheduled a specialty garbage pickup with my garbage company and he called me screaming that I put garbage out in front of my house that morning. I have a retaining wall in front of my house and he came by and yelled at me for cleaning it. The list goes on and on. Total nightmare experience, and I will never live somewhere with an HOA of any kind ever again. And the next one goes like this. We had a cookie cutter house built. One of the color palettes we could choose from included an accent color for the door/shutters that was a dark purple. The hubs and I are a little kooky, so we selected it. At our final walkthrough, our door and shutters are brown. I tell the general that it is wrong and show him my contract. We were the only homeowners in the subdivision that selected that color, so the HOA decided to not offer it anymore. We said fine, that puts you in breach of contract and we want to be released. A few phone calls later, my door and shutters are purple and I am happy. We purchased a house. At least once a year we got a nasty letter from the HOA about our unapproved door color. Every time I sent them a copy of my contract and their bylaws stating that the colors from the builder are allowed. Not my problem, you guys discontinued it after I picked it. And the next one goes like this. My former HOA threatened to take me to court over the color of a light bulb inside of my condo. They claimed that the color of a bulb inside my unit altered the exterior appearance of the building. I'd had Philips Hue lights for probably over a year without issue. Then my neighbor left up their Christmas lights well past New Year's and received a complaint about it. Next thing I knew, someone complained about my hue lights. I switched them to white. I could have won in court, but it wasn't worth angering a bunch of petty a-holes who have nothing better to do than to sit on an HOA board. Anyway, the association wanted to add a new amendment that allowed them to sue anyone over anything they deemed a nuisance. They brought in their lawyer for a question and answer session. I asked if the color of my neighbor's lights could be considered a nuisance. He clarified that it had to be a bigger concern. I followed up asking if we could claim that my neighbor had altered the exterior appearance of the building. He laughed and said no dismissively. So by that point their lawyer had already permitted their case was unwinnable, and he'd said earlier in the meeting a big part of his job was to keep the association from taking an unwinnable case to court. So the lights were whatever color I wanted them to be from then on. I now live in a neighborhood without an HOA. Sometimes a neighbor's grass is a bit high and another neighbor just built a patio in the front yard, and sometimes people put trash out a couple days before the city says they can and nobody says anything. It is wonderful. And the next one goes like this. Had a member of the board drive up and yell at me while I was moving in because the moving van was in the street. Parked it in the driveway, but it stuck out to the street about 2 feet. Woke up the next morning and there was a warning posted on the moving van for sticking out into the street. Welcome to the neighborhood. Ended up living next door to the biggest a-hole in the neighborhood too. These were 0 lot line properties and he put an above ground pool in the side yard between our 2 houses. There's supposed to be 3 feet space along the side of the house for access, but his pool went from his wall to my wall, so you could not even walk between the properties. Then every time they went swimming, the pool walls would flex and bang my house. I wrote multiple letters to the HOA, but they didn't do anything. Moved out shortly after the pool incident. I will never live in another HOA. And the next one goes like this. My HOA had a coup where half the board resigned on the spot same day, and the 3 board members that were left handed management of our neighborhood over to some mega HOA corporation based out of LA. Before the handoff was complete, the chairman of the board fired everyone that worked for the HOA, including our incredibly talented accountant who, due to his experience, kept our finances so tip-top that we had a surplus of money and have never had our monthly dues raised in almost 15 years. Then we, the residents, demanded an explanation. The chairman refused by quoting an article from our HOA charter, which gives the board the explicit right to manage the community however they see fit and without needed approval from the residents. He basically told us, "I don't owe any of you an explanation, so suck it." Now we are trying to overturn his decision to essentially give our neighborhood over to some crappy HOA management group that treats its residents horribly like a bad landlord would a tenant. Oh, and the management group that we were given to is run by a man whose only formal education is a degree in opera. And the accountant who has been assigned to manage my neighborhood finances does not have a degree in finance or business. She has a degree in ballet. It is my opinion that our board was bribed into selling us to that management firm. Our community hired a lawyer and we are in the process of reversing what our board has done. If successful, we are going to rehire everyone they terminated and change the bylaws to prevent anyone from ever being able to do this again. So yeah, that's my worst story and it is still going on right now. And the next one goes like this. A week after moving in, I received a letter from mine saying I was spotted not cleaning up after my dog in the common area. That was a blatant lie. Every single time he pooped there, it was picked up. I did not have roommates at the time, so there was no way it could have been someone else. The fine would be $100 fine after the first warning and $150 after that. I wrote back telling them I did not appreciate being lied to and accused, and that was not the way to welcome me to the neighborhood. I went on to inform them that if it happens again and they provide no evidence to back their claim, they will be hearing from my lawyer for harassment. They would do that to everyone that moved in with a dog. They constantly made up special rules about parking depending on who it was for. Us could not park on the road at all, others could. Brought that up to them and then called the president anytime I saw a car parked. He did not like the constant calls. I started parking on the street, and when he said something, I told him to F off and have the same rules for everyone or shut up. He shut up about it. They would complain about the backyard that could only be seen if you purposely went out of your way to look. They said they had to keep the community looking beautiful. I asked why there's always trash not picked up and little liquor bottles everywhere. Why weren't they picked up on his beauty walks? No answer. I made it a point to pick out every little thing in his yard and called him to report him. He did not like that, told him to stop harassing me or I'm getting my lawyer because he is singling out this house and it is going to end now or he's going to be paying for the consequences. And the next story goes like this. So, when I was a kid, my mom moved to a townhouse complex which had a strata council, which was basically an HOA. I often keep late hours, so I like to keep my windows blacked out so I can sleep in. So I tinfoiled my windows, which were recessed basement windows. You could not see these windows without being on our property. She got a notice to remove them because no window coverings are allowed unless they are white or beige. She passes this along to me. So I take the tinfoil down, put white paper over the windows and then tinfoil behind that. And to further improve things, I then add a layer of black construction paper. No light is getting through and it is all white from the outside, which is allowed. They then drop off a note asking what time they can come by to inspect to make sure there's no tinfoil on the inside of the window. My mom and I had a good laugh over this and I ignored the letter. They sent a follow-up, more demanding, angrier letter. We ignored that one too. Eventually, they sent one threatening fines and my mom sent one back that lied and said they had already inspected and they needed to figure their crap out. And then she got an apology and no further hassling on this issue because the strata council was full of busybodies who hated each other and no one wanted to admit that they were out of the loop. And guys, unfortunately, we have already reached the end of the video. It is very important that you let me know in the comments whether you enjoy r/Askreddit or not, because I think every once in a while this subreddit can be very interesting, especially when it covers topics that we enjoy. So yeah, please don't forget to leave me some feedback in the comments and also post some star emojis if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. In addition, if you are interested in more Just No Mother-in-Law stories, then I would suggest you head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube, where you will find over 40 exclusive Just No Mother-in-Law videos, starting at just $3 a month. This is a great additional way to support me if you want, but please don't feel compelled or pressured to do so. I fully understand if you don't want to pay for videos. I am already more than happy if you watch my videos on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day and I see you again tomorrow.